What's up, guys? Today I plan on taking you through the workflow, one of the workflows that I use for sampling drums onto the SP-404sx MK1 and some tricks that you might be able to pick up along the way. This isn't how I do stuff all the time on this machine, but this is going to be a cool way to learn kind of like my workflow in general on this machine. So this machine, it doesn't pitch down or pitch up samples really great like some of my other samplers. That's not what its strong point is. It also has no velocity sensitive pads, which is a blessing and a curse. There's also no mute group or choke group like an NPC or other of my samplers have that really kind of like magnify the rhythms and dynamics of a drum kit. So this doesn't even have like one-shot mode. It's kind of just like is what it is. It has a little gate on each sample, but I don't really use that too much. So that said, I'm going to show you some cool tricks of how I program the SP to make it really lively and human-like. So today I'm going to work with a little shoebox cassette player and a really crappy cassette that I recorded over with some drums from different sources and things like that. The reason I'm using this today is because, yeah, of course, I have many of different tape machines that are actually better quality than this, but I'm kind of using this specifically today to show you guys that it doesn't really matter what you're sampling from and what kind of fidelity that you're getting into this. You can always manipulate in this with the effects and resampling, and that's kind of like the point of this video. So let's take this drum cassette, tape, breaks, whatever else might be on here. I'm gonna play through until I find something I like. Once I find something I like, I'm going to make sure that my levels are right on the way in. You know, that's straightforward. Y'all know the samples. You can drop it in the comments. I'm just going to go through this like no fine print right here. So one more time for level. I like this to blink a little bit and that not to turn red. And the reason I do that is because I'm probably gonna add some level with EQ and different effects later. So let me just check that out as I adjust the volume here. If I can even find the volume. Okay, hold on. So that's like more of like the level that I want. A little bit of blinking, not a lot of red. So let's go back and we're gonna hit record. We're gonna select the pad that we want to record to, and when the sample comes up, I'll just hit record again. Okay, so that's our sample. So from here, I'm gonna always leave that original sample up here on number 1, pad number 1, and then I'm going to chop pieces of it and put it on the other pads to make a drum kit that can be played kind of differently and different patterns and things like that. So the first thing I want to do is I'm gonna go into, I believe it's effect 13. Yeah, 13 is an equalizer, and I'm gonna play that sample, and I'm going to try to make it a little bit brighter, a little bit crispier, because it'll help out identifying like noise in the sample and chops and stuff like that. So I'm going to let that ride, and I'm going to dial in high, mid, and low. So again, here's the original, and here's the new one. Cool, mid-range is a little crunchy. Maybe I'll relax a little bit of these. Okay. So what I want to do now is I'm going to start chopping out one shots. I usually start with a kick and a snare, and I move on to hi-hats and maybe some variations. So I'm going to listen to a nice clear kick that I want to grab. I'm going to use the mark button to mark the start and end point, and then I can fine tune it with the start and end. I like the second, I like that one. So what I want to do now is, you know what, I'm going to do that again, show you guys something. So I want to actually record this multi-effects by resampling it. So I'm going to go ahead and resample the entire thing with that EQ on, so I don't have to keep on going back and messing with EQs. Plus I want to further EQ each kick, snare, and hi-hat differently. So let me go ahead and resample onto pad 2. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit record and play the original sample, so now that I lock my effects in to a resampled loop of this. Okay. So, as you can tell, the multi-effects is off of this pad, and it's on this one, so there's the original. Here's the new one. Sounds a little bit more poppin'. Cool. So, what I want to do now is, I'm going to delete this first one altogether because I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to use the shift function button to then exchange these two samples, because there's nothing on one anymore. I like that to be my sample I'm working with. So exchange these two pads and hit record to say yes. And now my sample's here. Okay. So now I'm going to look for that second clear kick, and I'm going to mark it, chop it up, resample that to a pad as well. Okay, so first thing I'm identifying is that hi-hat that comes in at the end. I don't need that in there at all, so I'm going to hit start and end levels, and I'm going to adjust the end to look away from that hi-hat. Perfect, and let's make sure the front is nice and clean. So that's a little late, you can feel it in the pad. That's a little too chopped, so I'm looking for that transient and that nice little downbeat. That's all I really want. Adjust that end a little bit. Okay, now typically what I'll do is I'll leave this one dry. I like the cut, so I'll go ahead and resample that onto another pad. So I'm going to hit resample, choose the pad I want it on, hit record, and then let the sample play through, and then unarm it. That's it. So I'm resampled here. So I'm going to repeat that process and get me a snare now. I think I like that second snare. And so this is like personal preference stuff. I mean, sometimes you might want to keep that little hi-hat in there. For this one, I'm not going to keep the hi-hat in there. I'm going to go ahead and separate the hi-hat or grab a different hat for a dedicated hi-hat that I could play. So let's get that hi-hat out of the snare. That's really tight. Maybe a little less than that. Somewhere that seems natural, because again, this thing, you can resample and adjust volumes of effects and things to get fade outs, but there's no envelope on this machine. So it's really kind of like another limitation that you work with to get nice smooth drums. So I'm just pretty much getting as much as that air sound after the snare as I can get without hearing the next transient from the hi-hat. So I'm okay with that. Let's go for it. So resample. I'm gonna pick a pad that I want. Go ahead and resample that. So now I have a kick and snare. Okay. So before I get a hi-hat, I think I'm gonna go for like a ghost kick. Now in this, I've already heard the loop, so there is a little bit of that like kind of pickup kick, ghost kick, lower level, lower lead dynamic kick that is really cool for humanizing, right? If I didn't have that in there, I could always duplicate function copy the kick over to a different pad, and then adjust the level of this pad. so it's really low. And then while playing it, that can be like a ghost kick. And if there's a hi-hat, it'd probably make more sense, but I already heard a ghost kick in that sample. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete that example I just made. Go back and I'm gonna grab a kick now, a ghost kick. See that little pickup? I'm gonna get that. Okay, so I'm gonna trim out the kick. Make sure the front is really nice and crisp. So right there you can tell the beater noise is out. I don't want that. I definitely want to get that nice little beater noise in there. I think that's pretty cool. Make sure the end is nice again. And the ghost kicks can be really tight and short. That's good enough for me right there. Okay, so I'm going to resample that to 5. That sounds nice and natural. Also, this ghost kick doesn't have that hi-hat included in the kick. As you can tell, there's the right hand hi-hat is on that kick. This one's dry. It doesn't have it because it's in between hi-hats in the pattern. So let's get ourselves a hat or two, and then we can start to play the beat. And I'm going to show you some other cool stuff that I like to do with the effects to make it even more kind of your own. So again, we didn't even do any pitching or anything yet. This is just strictly chopping. So I'm going to go in here, unmark this, and listen for a hi-hat. That last step, I like it right here. Nice mellow hi-hat. So something I'll do here most of the time is I'll take my multi-effects back to number 13, the EQ, or you can use the isolator for this as well. But I'm going to wipe out any low end so that there's not any kind of like rumbling on a hi-hat, just because again, like there's no global filter on this or anything, so it's really helpful that each individual sample is actually doing only what you really need it to do. A lot of air noise, maybe some like below 120 hertz in there that we don't really want. So first thing I'll do is I'll trim it with some low end. I'm not even sure what these filters are set to, but maybe I'll make the hi-hat a touch brighter, and then literally almost take out all of the lows, just so it's, see, that's kind of muddy. If you guys are wearing headphones watching, you'll hear that that's like kind of, and this is a little sharper. And I'm actually cool with the start, I believe. I'm cool with that. So, gonna go ahead and resample with the multi-effects on, so that's a little bit thinner. Pick the pad I want, hit record, grab that hat. So now I have kick, snare, hi-hat, and little ghost kick. So this is a good time to adjust levels of things. So the hat, I'll usually drop the level from full volume at 127, maybe like to like below 120. So it's emphasizes kick and snare a little bit more. And same thing on the ghost, I'll just kind of bring that down a little bit more. So now the drums seem a little bit more like punchy and dynamic than they were in the original recording, which is kind of cool. So here's a different thing. Adding effects to our chops now is kind of cool too. So I'm pretty much going to do the same thing I did for these 4, and I'm going to do variations of them here, maybe for a different part of the song or something like this. So first thing we'll do is we'll take the hi-hat, and what do we want to do? Something I do sometimes is as I go to the delay, and I'll make a little kind of rhythm with the hi-hat track. So that when you play it, let's see if I can get it a little bit longer. just to add a little bit of something in there. Okay, so let me resample that with some delay. I'll just throw that here for now. Okay, then on that one, I'm also going to put a vinyl simulator, which is what, 16? So I'm going to use some flutter. I'm going to open the filter all the way up, and I'm going to give it some noise. Okay, resample that again. So now I can delete this thing, and I have a really dirty hi-hat with some delay on it. Okay, this bad boy, I'm going to use, I think it's 23, subharmonic generator. So pretty much this is like something that you could use on almost any sound. Let's see. You guys hear that car alarm? Okay, so here's the full sound that you're adding to the kick. Here's the kick that it's listening to. And then you can adjust threshold and pitch of that sound. So I don't want it to be like an 808. I just want it to be somewhere in the background. So I'm going to adjust the balance, and I'm going to see kind of what the fundamental of that kick actually is. Dum, 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 dum. Something around there. So I'm going to adjust the mix just so there's a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of that low end in there. Cool. Resample. Hit it. This thing's cool. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this over to 7. And hi-hat, we already made a new one. Snare. Is there a different snare in there that I want? Let's check. Let's try the first one. Yeah, the first one's actually cleaner than that one, so let's go ahead and clean that up. So since this thing is actually a mono, it plays back in mono, the samples I grabbed were in stereo from a different deck, recorded in true stereo, and you can kind of tell if you're listening in headphones or on some nice studio monitors that there's a little bit of like a flangey, phasey thing that's happening because this has been summed to mono, and I sampled into the machine just kind of like both tracks summed. And with heavier, mid-rangey cymbal background stuff, you can really hear like this kind of like tape flanging thing that this snare doesn't seem to have as much of. Kind of tight. So let's see if we can make it just pop a touch more, and we'll put it here. So let's go back to our multi-effects. I'm going to go back into that EQ, and I'm going to bring up a more mid-range. And kind of make it pop. Always compare it just as if you're on like a piece of rat gear or whatever effect you had. Compare where you were to where you're going. Woo! We can tell that's cool and popping. Okay, so let's resample that. Down here to 12. That's tight. Already light years ahead of where we were, and this was actually resampled pretty tactfully. But this sounds very tight. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode of how to do stuff on your SP. I'm gonna do a round 2 because I have some different kind of tips and stuff of how I like to resample entire beats, and also use the sequencer with some of the sequencer's functions to get this thing to be really radical too. So Hell yeah. Anything that you didn't like or anything that you liked, let me know in the comments. Till next time.